They want the brand power. They want something to put on the shelf. And it's very short lived. As we all know in sales, like it's really easy to get in the door, but really hard to continue selling. And I think a lot of people forget about that and just think, oh, that's a brand, it's going to sell immediately. It might sell that first time, but the customer gets a shitty jar, they're never going to want to buy that product again.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Nate D., a man of many, many hats. What's going on, Nate? Thanks for taking the time. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you guys for having us.
Excited to dive in. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Really excited to talk to Nathan. It's nice to have a loyal West Coaster back on the podcast. You know what I mean? But how are you doing today, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think before we hopped on, I was trying to figure out like how to associate Nate. And even though he's got a ton of opportunities here on the East Coast, we're going to just put you on the record, Nate, a little East Coast, West Coast battle where you take that loyalty.
Oh, man. I love them both, but I'm loyal to the soil, where I was born and raised. So I'm a West Coast native for sure.
I love it. So for our listeners unfamiliar about you, can you kind of give a little background about yourself and how you found your way to the cannabis space?
Yeah. So I'm a co-founder of 3 businesses and 3 different types of verticals. We have one company which is called Turn. Turn is a vaporizer company that has a proprietary device. I have also a flower company, which is one of my favorite businesses because I'm a smoker till I die. I mean, I smoke every day. So I'm a weed connoisseur, but we have Made, and then we have a very cool project that I like working on. It also involves flower, which is called Project Packs.
I love it. So just from like how they're all structured, how you spend your time and kind of the origin of them, did one kind of start first and then the others evolve to overcome problems? Take us through that whole entire concept.
Yeah. So they all kind of work together as a synergy, which is really nice for me, like almost like an ecosystem, which helps me a lot with doing all 3 of them. Turn is predominantly a vaporizer system, and that one it's really nice and easy. We use live resin, rosin, and obviously we have distillate with botanical terps. So we try to cover all 3 vape verticals. So I spend a lot of time on that one. Then we have Made, which is purely 100% flower, all eighths, pre-rolls, and some rosin products also too. And then Project Packs is a really cool dynamic of it allows other brands that have really big hype and other big loyalty like Wizard Trees or Doja. What we do is we take over assets in other states. And I have no ego, right? I know, we take over these big facilities. I would love to say that my brand's big enough to eat up all the cannabis space, but we all know it's very hard to do that in these big facilities, and that's why a lot of them fail. So what we do is we take a lot of our friends' brands, the people that trust us. We have a badass cultivation team, and my business partner is one of the best growers I think possible out there. And what we do is we grow all their flower, all their genetics, and we basically grow from A to Z, grow them, and all the way to sell them.
It's kind of like an incubator, for like startups, right? Like how did you guys come up with that idea? That's really cool.
Yeah, so Project Packs, basically, we came up with that idea just purely off of I looked at my partner, he had a brand and I had a brand. It's 800 lights, and we started this project in Arizona. It's 800 lights. It's a big facility, right? It's pumping out tons of weed, and no matter how big your brand is, it's very hard to sell that much weed recreationally and especially a state like Arizona. There's roughly 200 dispensaries. It's not like California, so. What we decided to do is we called up all of our friends and we're just like, yo, we have this facility. I have this idea. What do you think about it? They all know me on this side of the business. They all know Jordan. Jordan owns a company called Blueprint Cannabis. They all know Jordan, that he grows really quality flower here in the West Coast. And they're like, let's do it. So it was just really organic. Like we just literally picked up the phones. We got this opportunity and we just started calling our friends. We have in that platform, we have Made, which is my brand, Blueprint, which is Jordan's brand. We have Doja, we have Wizard Trees, and Preferred Gardens. So a lot of West Coast natives that we brought into California natives that we brought into Arizona.
I mean, it's super smart, right? There's the few aspects I want to highlight. It's the trust aspect, right? The ability to call up your friends and say, hey, like, here's an opportunity. But also from the customer standpoint, they get to see a bunch of really, really popular brands. It helps to turn over the store and the product really fast and generate the buzz that I think is one of the biggest challenges here in the industry, is that when you have a brand that's one brand, you're trying to expand different states, it's extremely challenging from finding the right spot, the right partners, the right capital. So aligning all that has allowed your team to really kind of like not skip the line, but accelerate the pace of growing to other states.
Yeah, and it's really like, I think the hardest part about scaling a business, and actually the toughest part I've now learned in cannabis, is scaling cultivation. Like, you can scaling vapes very easy, and you can be the best grower, have the badass cultivation team. There's going to be problems, right? We're a year and a half into that facility, and it was a trial and error, for 3-4 months. And, making sure, for us, the biggest challenge is like, could we have put shitty weed in our friends' jars or our jars? Yes, but that's why they trusted us. That's something we don't do at all. Like, we care about our friends' brands like they're our own. And so I'm extra big on QC, and I want to make sure that, our third-party partnership brands get the best love and they're taken care of. So that's a really big challenging was when we launched this platform, was making sure QC was on point, because we're growing over 100 different genetics in that facility, and every single one of them grows differently. Every single one of them acts differently. It's like you have a bunch of kids basically running around a facility, and you don't know how to react to them, and trying to pair them up. These ones kind of grow alike, so let's put these ones in the same room. So it's very challenging. That was one of the most challenging parts about this facility or this platform, was taking everyone's different genetics and trying to get them to basically work in one program.
How do you do that, right? And then on the flip side, is it difficult managing all of the personalities and interests and understanding how unique those brands are, and how close you have to be in order to attain with that vision to make sure that it meets their standards on a regular basis? Because that's really difficult to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have weekly conversations with a lot of the brands and making sure like we're on point, making sure that our sales team is doing what they can do best. Our marketing team's trying to help them push the product inside the state. When we started off, a lot of the brands tour the facility often to come out and take a look at the flower, because California to Arizona, it's a quick hour flight. That's basically you being stuck in traffic in LA. So it's not too bad of a flight. So they came and QC'd a lot of the flower, but now they kind of trust us. They're like, all right, they got it. And it's like, for me, I'm never the one to just put anything into a jar. It has to hit those QC standards, not only just from look and smell, but smoke ability is our biggest one. And we batch test every single batch to make sure it's smoking before it ever hits a jar. And so, and QC is really big for us. The biggest part really is juggling all these genetics, and, it took some time for us to really figure out. Like I said, we're a year and a half into this project, and we finally now have like, all right, these strains from X, Y, and Z brand work really good in this room. These ones work good in this room. These ones grow similar. These hazes, you have these red dragon, super silver haze, and blue dream. All right, we're putting all those inside one room. So we can really adapt really quickly if we know and which genetics go well with each other.
I was just going to say, how did you guys come up with like your QC standards, right? Because like, I have a different flavor palette than say Brian, than say you. Did you guys kind of like all get together and you're like, hey, here's these metrics, and this is like how we come up with like smokability, right? Like some people like a really heavy cough, you know what I mean, when they're like hitting a blunt. Some people like it. So like I'm just curious, like how do you guys like establish those as like a group?
Yeah, so what we kind of did with all the brands originally, our cultivation team first worked closely with the cultivators from the brands, asking them how everything grows, how everything's supposed to look, what week, hey, week 6, this is looking like this. What do I do from here? So that was the step one, really understanding how all the plants grow. And then from there, obviously everyone's taste, like you said, is completely different. So we're trying to get them as close as what the organic taste is supposed to be of what the original cultivators are. You can get pretty close. Don't get me wrong, just, a batch in Cali versus some of their batches in Florida and some of their batches in Arizona taste different, probably just slightly. We all use different nutrients at the facilities, but we try to use the best that we can. And then the main one is trying to just make sure it looks the same, right? Because that's the one that we have to focus on, because that's what a lot of retail customers buy off of, right? They buy off the bag appeal and what the genetic's known for. And so that was the most, that would say that would be was the hardest part, is making sure we get the look of the strains perfectly every time.
I love it. So from California to Arizona, what was the next state after that?
Yeah, so that's Project PAX is only in Arizona right now. We're working on another deal right now in the East Coast, in Pennsylvania. So really excited about that one, and then also out in New Jersey, and that's bringing the house of brands in those other states. So we're working on that. Turn, our other company, or my other company, it's a vaporizer company, proprietary. It looks like Apple AirPods. This is like one of them right here. This is the pink version, so it kind of looks like AirPods. And we're in California, we're in Arizona. We launch in Pennsylvania actually on that platform here in the next 2 months. So really excited for that. It's a medical market. You want to go recreational here soon, and then we're actively in New York.
I love it. So hypothetically, if an MSO contacts you and says, hey, Nate, we're in 7 states, we'd love to partner up, is part of the assets that you can bring to the table the ability to say, okay, I have this brand, I've got also a flower brand, and I also have the collective that can bring to the table?
Yeah, it's all of them, right? That's what's nice about the ecosystem, Turn is the easiest one to scale, right? Because it's, hey, if we go out, we work with other cultivators, like, let's see what your oil tastes like. So that one's the really easy one. But yes, we have a lot of opportunities that are getting pushed towards us for cultivation opportunities. But as I said, earlier, it's just like, that is the hardest part of scaling cannabis is cultivation. And so we've learned that turn can go at rapid growth and expansion very quickly, but cultivation's like really a step-by-step basis. So we don't want to take on too much. But yeah, we've had opportunity by MSOs to bring all the verticals to all the states, which is really cool and exciting to do.
But the biggest hesitancy there was just the inability to meet kind of the QA/QC standards you're thinking?
Yeah, so for cultivation, that's our biggest one is QC standards. Like, there's a lot of people that have been asked to license, the brand's name and, the maiden name, or taking some of the other brands that we work with in other states. And for us on cultivation, we have to be involved. I'm not our own brands. We can't do the licensing deal unless it's someone that I know personally that, they grow fire, I'm going with them. But for us, it's really making sure that our team's running the cultivation and not just doing a pure licensing deal. Because to me, unless you have people caring for your brand, just like, it's their own, usually a lot of people in other states don't really care. They want the brand power. They want something to put on the shelf. And it's very short lived. As we all know in sales, like, it's really easy to get in the door, but really hard to continue selling. And I think a lot of people forget about that and just think, that's a brand, it's going to sell immediately. It might sell that first time, but the customer gets a shitty jar, they're never going to want to buy that product again.
100%. And I think one of the biggest challenges that you work so hard to have that brand credibility, and you can lose it pretty much instantly. So the challenge and the dynamic of trying to scale at like the right speed and also handle that quality is a really, really difficult balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you balance your time then, right? Because you have this one aspect that's like can just catch fire, right, and scale super quickly. So it's almost like you gotta like you're pulling on the leash, right? And then the other one, you're over here that like you really gotta like baby and like you don't want it to. It's learning to walk still, right? Like you're like trying to hold it up. So
Yeah.
like, how do you balance your time?
Well, unfortunately, all the babies are in infant stages right now. So, one's 1 year old, one's 1 year old, one's 2 years old, but they're pretty close. And, I would say it's a testimony of our team, right? Like, there is fires, don't get me wrong. Like I told you earlier, I had 5 this morning, but, it's really for us is making sure we have a strong team. And that's so important with scaling, making sure there's people that you can trust, ones that handle the brand, the operations, and cultivation, scale. Like it's very tough to manage my time if I had to do all of them, but we do put a lot of trust in our team, and having a strong team behind you and a loyal team behind you, you can make a rocket ship because they're in it to win it with you. But as far as my time, I think I spend them pretty equally. A little bit more time maybe on, Made right now, just because it's very infant stages. Turn, we started 2 years ago. In the ref, we have like 70 employees now throughout a couple different states. So that one can, watch itself a little bit. In the team, there's a little bit more upper management there to be able to handle some more of the fires. Don't get me wrong, things still happen. But it's I would say spread equally, but a lot of focus right now is on, made in the cultivation side.
Is there a thought if one of your employees on turn is like a true star and is taking on more and more that you can bring them more to like an elevated role to help kind of oversee the collective?
Yeah. So all the companies operate independently. So they all have their own COOs, they all have their own marketing, they all have, all their own independently. But there has been some, switch over in our company. Like, for me, I'm all about internal growth. Like, right. I want people, I want to build careers. Like I was given the opportunity, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, of someone that really brought me up in the industry that put us in touch. I was given the opportunity, and that person gave me a lot of opportunities to scale within an organization. And so I like giving that back, and I like creating careers. I like someone coming up from hourly to, a big salary position. So what we try to do is if there's someone that we see is thriving in one of my businesses, and then there's an opportunity of growth or more money in another one, of course, I'll talk to my partners on the other business, get good graces, but I'll move them around. And all my partners are pretty much the same. They understand, like, we always want to build careers, because when you build careers for people and people that are behind you, they'll work super hard for you. So,
especially in an industry like ours where there's endless challenges, right? And given the fact that you're spreading different businesses to different states that have their own kind of unique elements, you could take someone who's thriving in one role and kind of put them in a completely different challenge, all within the same umbrella that is kind of like on your desk.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And there's some of my employees, they're hybrids, like they'll help me. And like, especially the made and the project pack team, those teams work almost like in synchrony. They work very close together. They help each other out. They work really close. So, and then same thing with Turns in Arizona, where Project Packs, that's where its headquartered is. So Project Packs gave Turn a platform to basically launch in the state, and they all helped each other out. Like, Arizona is probably the state that all of our businesses are very close together out of any of the states that we operate in, because each one of the businesses there. So I actually spend a lot of my time, probably 2 to 3 days a week, in Arizona, because all three of my businesses are there.
What's the biggest challenge with scaling the cultivation? Is it personnel? Is it experience? Is it trust? Just for those people who are always like, hey, like, why isn't it so much easier just to add a few more lights and some more product?
Personnel, for sure. It's always, I call it, when you scale cultivation, it's tough, right? When you go and hire other cultivators in other states, each cultivator has their own recipe, their formula. And what happens when we scale and we go to a new state, sometimes some of the cultivators we hire in other states, they kind of go back to their old tendencies and not sticking to like the format. And not like it's a bad thing, but sometimes that happens over and over and over again, and it makes it challenging. So that's just the hardest. And then environmentals, even though you're running an indoor facility, right? Outside climate, everything still changes the inside of the facility. Post-production is the craziest. Like when we first launched in Arizona, we tried our same post-production from California to Arizona, and if the weed was dry as shit, like when we first launched it, those are the biggest challenges: post-production, finding personnel, and training people to really grow your same SOP that you have in other states.
The reason I asked that question is because like it's a constant on Twitter where it's like, well, it's not so hard, like just do X, right? And I think hearing from someone like yourself who's tried it and experienced it and knows that if they could just open up 6 other places, you could still make it successful. But the missing piece in that whole link is the personnel aspect.
Absolutely. It's people you trust, right? And that's the biggest thing. Like, there's a lot of things that can slip through the cracks, especially in cultivation. And the thing about cultivation, it's not like quick fixes. Like, if something happens in, week 4 and it's something detrimental, like, oh, the ACs or the DHUs didn't hit, like, you're screwed all the way through. Like, your quality just changed. So, making sure that stuff is watched like a baby, watched like a hawk, and just over every single step, because there's no really turning back. Yes, there's a little bit of turning back in cultivation, but if there's a really big mess up, it's sticking with you, and you basically have to look at this product that's not good for 3 months until it gets to the market. So
again, I think another huge aspect that's overlooked is like, just because you can grow it doesn't mean like it all sells at the perfect time when it's right from a curing perspective and the consumer is going to have the best experience, right? Like, there's all of these other like downstream factors that influence it, right?
yeah, it's crazy because like we think like this product is going to hit. This thing is fire. Like we're all super stoked about it. Like this is to be our biggest next move. Then we put it in the market. No one likes it. So like we've definitely experienced, that things that we thought was really good. And, that's the challenges of any market. Like you can be the best brand, best marketing. There's some of the biggest brands in the world, have flopped on some product developments and stuff that's rolled out. And, it hurts a little bit because you think, this is the one, and then it flops. And we run through those challenges, not often, but, we think that we have something really cool, this new product development or new strain, and it just doesn't hit in the market as well as we, wanted to.
Sometimes it could just be timing, right? It could just be random occurrences or timing not being right. And I always wonder, like, someone like yourself who probably experiences a bunch of ideas coming to Mac, working with all these incredible cultivators and brands who've done some really amazing things. I'm sure there's endless ideas of collabs and crosses and considerations too. So again, how do you balance that element of these work? Do we take 10% and put it towards R&D? What does that look like?
Bro, I was actually just having this conversation this morning about R&D program, like the R&D of cultivation, to really create a strain. It really takes a full year, and people don't understand how much it really costs. You have multiple different phenos. You're running multiple different cycles before it's a production run. I was talking to someone this morning about it. It's how expensive that is to launch a program in their new strain, and it's crazy to see what is very popular now, and you could spend a full year, R&Ding something, and it just doesn't work out. But as far as collaborations and spending time on thinking about the next hottest thing is, just working with our team. For us, we're not really the ones on the ground floor, in the market and the sales. So we really depend on data, or we're a very data-driven company on all of our companies. We look about where the market's trending, what's selling in the market, what consumers are buying. We ask our retailers for a lot of data of what's the hottest strains, and we really rely on data to make choices as best as we can. As much as I like going from the gut, sometimes you gotta use some data a little bit to make sure that you're on point for the next couple months.
Are there certain trends that you see maybe on a state by state basis and saying, okay, California goes first, then Florida, then Arizona?
Yeah, for Turn, we do all new SKU launches in California first. We think California is one of the tougher markets, just as there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of things that we just have to work through. So we usually do product developments in Turn first in California. And then if it's successful in California, then we'll just basically roll it out to the rest of the states. And the same thing with, the flower, right? Is if it works really well in California, we'll try it in Arizona, but there's stuff that we've seen that, worked well in California, didn't work well in Arizona, or vice versa. Stuff, this didn't really work good in California, let's launch it in another state, see how it is, and it worked really well. For us in, going back to the R&D program, Arizona, we can spend so much time R&Ding, creating this new strain for that year. But then what we're seeing in Arizona, our number one selling strain, I'm not even lying, is Super Silver Haze. It's fire, don't get me wrong, but it's an OG strain. And that's what I see the market trending towards, even in California now too. And, I have some friends that grow on the East Coast, same thing, those OG strains that kind of put the industry on back in the day, they're coming back. Blue Dream, I used to laugh at people really growing Blue Dream 6 years ago, right? Or 5 years ago maybe. And now it's shit, it's popular again. We have a lot of hazes coming back. J1, is Jack basically. I always say, remember our first time ever smelling Jack, 10 years ago, whatever long ago goes. Whoa, that's insane, that smell. You ask someone now 6 years ago, you have Jack in the store, he's buying that. But I think cannabis is still very early adoption. And so now you have new consumers going to retail stores, smelling things like Jack that they've never smelled before, and their eyes are just lighting up. And that's what they gravitate towards. Things that have crazy noses, and those hazes, those Jacks, and all those OG type of strains people are going towards because they have those loudest and those dominant noses. And I've been seeing a lot of the market trending towards stuff like that.
100%. And I can only wonder, for me, if I smell those, it'd bring me back to when I first started smoking. And that maybe could be part of the experience. It's you smell something and you're instantly kind of brought back to a different part of your life.
Of course. And it's nostalgic, honestly. I remember the first batch of Jack we regrew like a year ago, and I was like, "Yo, this is crazy. I missed this nose." And my partner looks at me, he's like, "I can't believe you're saying this," but man, I was just like, it's so eye-opening. Then here we go, like just like I was talking about, like Super Silver Haze, J1, all these genetics are some of our top selling SKUs in states like Arizona.
Is there ever conversations with people close to you? Obviously, we can get into the Caleb relationship, but just someone like him who's such a paramount figure in California. Do you guys talk about like the direction of the industry and kind of strains to do, or is it more of like a parallel approach and saying, okay, this is what I'm thinking, and he takes his own approach?
Yeah, so me and Caleb have a very interesting relationship. I would say Caleb is a mentor. He's literally one of my best friends. He's put a platform for me, but me and Caleb talk very often about our companies and where we're going and what we're looking at. And we probably talk, I'd say 2 to 3 times on the phone a week. We text every day. So we have a very close relationship, and we work together and see what the market's like and strategy. And I go over things with him. He'll bounce ideas by me. And that's the great thing about this community, not just with Caleb, but cannabis has one of the closest knit communities of brands. Like I'll talk to other people from other big businesses and get their feedback. And, a lot of the people we work with don't mind sharing, their feedback and what's going on in the market. But yeah, I utilize my friends in this industry as much as possible and getting like, hey, what's working for you? What have you seen? Who's a good payer in the industry? Do you know anything about, is this retailer a good payer? Is this one not a good payer? Like, so we always bounce ideas off each other.
That influence is so important, right? Because again, like it goes back to the trust element, which I think is a big challenge here in the industry because so many people have been burned by taking leaps of faith on relationships that just never worked out. So having that ally is so important. But then from an influence standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, right? Having the brands kind of aligned from a directional standpoint is really beneficial for a consumer who's still kind of figuring out like, do I want this? Do I want something new? How do I figure that out? It really kind of depends on what's available.
Absolutely. I mean, the consumers, it's so important with them. So,
what's an element that you tried that completely failed that you were shocked failed?
An element that completely failed that I was shocked. Also, going back to a strain drop, it literally haunts me. I dropped. It was like a year and a half of literally trial and error, and we went through like 1,200 seeds of like this pheno and just, over and over. And with this, like, this is the one a year and a half. And it just never worked out. It hurt me so much that it didn't work out. And then we do it a lot in turn. Turn is, we have usually on the flavor side, like 24 flavors on our menu stable at all time. And we always try new flavors. Like we have this mixologist that takes, different type of terps, live resin, and tries to mix a bunch of stuff. And, we've had a lot of, stuff that hit really well, and then some strains that just no one liked. So it's a challenge, especially on the vape side, but at least on the vape side, you're not stuck. Like if that one run doesn't work out, you don't have 3 more harvests ahead of it planning, knowing that shit, this didn't work out. I thought it was going to work out really well. And now I have, a whole year planted of this and I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
Did it deter you at all from continuing that R&D approach?
Problems happen, challenges happen, right? Like it's just like you can't give up after one, miss, and not saying I've had just one miss, I've had multiple. But you just can't give up. Like that's the challenge of this industry. There's going to be numerous problems. There's going to be so many different issues. And God, if I gave up after a challenge, there would be a lot of give ups at this point, but you just got to keep going, and you can't let one mess up or one issue in cultivation, or, something happening in trimming or post-production or a flavor not dropping. It's going to happen. It happens every single week. There's a problem every single week. You got to keep pushing through for sure.
Are there certain strains where it just like doesn't turn out from like a cultivation flower experience, but you're like, man, this thing is going to slap if it freaking, once we turn it into oil? And if so, like, how do you kind of manage that like relationship where you're like, okay, I know the flower isn't perfect, but like, this is a great like plant for like turn, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we've actually done that. And, we run collaborations between the brands, and we do that a lot. Like we had this honey banana strain that we grew, and it looked terrible. Like it was like no bag appeal. It was ugly. We tried to release it out in the market and it just didn't do well. We got a lot of good feedback. Oh, this tastes good, But as we know, again, things have to look decent.
Yeah.
And so we tried to, oh, it's fire, and smoke it, but it just sat on the shelf because consumers look at, product first, just like anyone should. Like you're buying something that's to go inside your body. Like you go buy a fruit, you bought one that looked brown. You're not going, oh, I'm going to pick this other one. So a lot of cannabis purchases are purchased off of look and smell. But yeah, it's worked out to our benefit being able to have. And like I said, sometimes you plant things for a full year or get things ready to go in production and cultivation. But it's really nice being able to say, hey, we're going to take that biomass, make it fresh frozen. And it turned out really good. Like that honey banana flavor is one of our top selling strains now in turn, because the terps and the taste profile is phenomenal. So it happens. And that's the great thing about having a good ecosystem between the brands is something might not work out on the cultivation side, but hey, let's fresh frozen it, we'll chop it, turn separate entity will now buy that and we'll process it into oil. We can do a collaboration. So
it's so nice, right? The ecosystem. And I'm starting to think about like my purchasing habits and like looking at a product. And I think to myself, it's not so pretty, but also at the end of the day, like, why is that such an influential factor? But it is. And you're right. Is there a thought to putting into like a pre-roll so users don't see the flower?
yeah, and, we do sometimes, but like majority of the time, what we'll do is we'll process it into, we like, and especially on the flower side, I like having all the verticals, like the pre-rolls, the eighth, the half ounce, like when we launch a strain, I want to launch it in all of them. There's been times that, we've launched stuff predominantly in pre-rolls, but for me, like I'm a connoisseur smoker, like, man, we have pre-rolls, but there's nothing better than rolling your own pre-roll. Like you can use the knock boxes and grind them down, but it's never going to smoke the same as rolling it yourself. So there's been some times that we've done like R&D programs and just put them in pre-rolls, and we gave them out as samples to get feedback. We've never really released something that just went straight into pre-rolls.
Is there a brand that you're not working with that you're a big fan of that you're like, every time I go out, like I'm always looking to see what they're trying or what they're putting out?
Yeah, of course. Like I'm a huge 710 fan. I love their Percy. Their product's phenomenal. And man, I'm like I said, you guys asked me earlier from where's my loyalty land in West Coast and East Coast. I'm loyal to the soil person. Like I love seeing what Connected and Alien Labs does. They're one of the biggest brands in the country. And I know just from my history with them of how much they put into those brands, and it's amazing to see how many new genetics they release, how many strains they put out, and like they're always creating. Like Ted, the founder of Alien Labs, is a huge weed nerd and a nerd in general. He's a good friend of mine. I love that guy. And just his creative mind is insane. Like what he processes and what he puts out and what his team does is huge. Like the Alien Labs brand is one of the, I by far actually, Alien Labs is the sickest like cannabis brand, I personally think. Like there's no sicker brand than Alien Labs. And again,
I mean, shout out to Ted for sure. And I think what element I learned from them that I didn't know was the R&D elements. That's what I was leaning into on that, because when Caleb was talking about how long and how much they spend on that blew my mind. I can only imagine if that's what they're doing. And I know from your lineage growing up under that tree, that was something that you recognized how important that was. And that's why bringing that into what you're doing now is probably so critical.
Yeah, it is. That was the person I was talking to this morning about. I was with Caleb talking about just the R&D program, how much it costs to really develop a strain. And we literally were talking about stuff that hits and doesn't hit. So it's heartbreaking to you, right? You spend a year and a half to 2 years of developing a strain. And, if it doesn't hit, you're like, dang, it's heartbreaking, but you can't let it hit you and put you down. Like, you just got to keep pushing forward.
No, especially in this industry, persistence is key, right? At the end of the day, like you just have to continue to persist.
Absolutely.
I think the toughest thing too about a lot of that is like a lot of times it's really good weed too, right? It's just like maybe the consumer just didn't like the name in that 2 months, or like, you know what I mean? It's wild because a lot of times it's good weed, right?
You look at it like if we would have dropped like these super silvers, blue dreams and stuff like 2 years ago on the market,
People
people
laugh at.
yeah, what is this? Like, and then now like things that are like those candy flavors, it's crazy to see but don't get me wrong, I mean, we're all from that industry. Like I still have friends in the other side of the business. They're like, candies are the number one selling strain out there. And like, it's crazy. Like that's nothing in the rec market at all. Like, yes, there's people that buy candies and stuff, like that candy flavor profile, there's lemon cherry gelatos, but it's not as wanted in the recreational side of the dispensary. It's like on those other sides.
And it's not as if cannabis just grows instantly, right? So it's not like as soon as things start popping off, you can just instantly flower.
Yeah.
Takes time.
Takes time. Like that's to the R&D pro. Like you're spending so much on the R&D in a full year. and then you're not launching it till the next year. Then you're like, yo, that was cool last year, not cool this year. So it's like fashion almost, like, right? Like with clothing, like what's cool this last year, it's just not popping off. You just have to be fast and quick. And sometimes it's really tough with cultivation.
It's crazy too, because like sometimes you get a product in a bag and all you're doing is evaluating the way it looks and the way you intuitively feel, likely the price, and all of those elements decide whether you take option A or option B.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell me something that's true that nobody agrees with you on.
Something that's true that nobody agrees with me on. Oh man, that's a tough question, loaded question. Effort. I'm a very persistent person, and a lot of our team, I would say, kind of like if they get told one or two times, like no, like they give up. And I'm very big on keep going and keep trying. And I would say like that's just more or less like part of the sales part of our organization is like just keep going. Like a lot of people think that you get one or two answers and that's done. Like that's the last thing. And that comes in to even on the cultivation side or on the product development side, just because like it may not work now, but continue trying and continue pushing forward because you can't ever just give up on the first try. I don't know if that really answers that question. So
No,
sorry.
that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you do if you had to do another startup not in your area of expertise in cannabis?
So I would hire people that are smarter than me, people that know those fields, know those industries, and not thinking that you're going to be dominant and be the best at everything. You have to it's so important for you to hire people smarter than you, like people that know those in the industry. And I think a lot of founders and CEOs have a little bit of an ego sometimes and think that they're the smartest and the best at what they do. And I would say definitely going into a new market or new brand or anything, hire a strong core team and hire people that are smarter than you.
What is your go-to hobby to turn it off?
My go-to hobby to turn it off, as much as I would love to do it as much as often, I love snowboarding. It's like one of my favorite things to do. Just roll up a blunt and a real blunt, not these hemp blunts. So roll up a real blunt with nice grape flavor, and just go snowboarding. Or even like if there's good weather, like I'm originally from Northern California in Sacramento, lakes and rivers are big over there. So jumping on a wakeboard, anything like getting out and getting active on a board is one of my favorite things to do.
Dream smoking session, 3 people dead or alive.
Dang, that one's tough. Dead or alive. I would love to smoke with Martha Stewart. I think that would be a fun one. And Al Capone, I'd love to smoke with him. That'd be a good one too. And then, man, lastly, I'd probably say Ice Cube.
I love it.
I don't know why, but I would like to go inside that guy's brain.
What question do you wish more people asked you?
Things that ask me, well, for the industry, I love when people ask about resources and ask about market. A lot of people ask, how is this doing well for you? When I like when people ask, what do you think is going to do well? So like kind of like redoing the question and trying to get more deep and depth of it. Instead of talking about, what's currently going on, let's talk about, how to forecast and plan what's going to be cool in the industry in the next 6 to 12 months. I think a lot of us, we focus on the now and so we don't really focus on the future and how we can work together to the future of the industry.
12 months from now, what is popular?
That's a tough question because I don't know. Right? We thought, a couple of years ago, we thought beverages during COVID were going to be a huge hit. We thought, I don't know. I mean, and the cool thing about, my partner, his name's Rob on the Turn side. He's our chief product officer and also co-founder of the business. He product developments all the time. He's always bringing new stuff. And so I rely a lot on that. But man, I just don't know what's going to be, for the future. We're R&Ding a bunch of new cool stuff, product development, new SKUs, new hardware for Turn. And we're also doing a lot of cool stuff with Project Packs and Made. And like as we talked about earlier, we're always hoping that these new things hit, and there might be one or two of them that don't, but we're spending the time and energy to make sure they do hit.
Is there any underrated piece of information about California that most wouldn't know?
Yeah, I mean, resources. California is one of the biggest markets in the industry, and being able to rely on your resources. A lot of people, I think people are too afraid to ask questions to their competitors and think that they're going to get the wrong information just because they're their competitors. But if you make it in California, you can really make it in every other state. California has been through the waves, ups and downs so much. And I really feel like the information that people don't ask enough questions in California to be able to scale their businesses in other states.
Love it. Last question, Nate. What is the single biggest lesson you've learned while being in cannabis?
Trust. Absolutely. I got to give him a big shout out. I know we just mentioned his name a few times. Caleb Counts, brother from another mother. He really taught me to relying on people with trust. Back in the industry, we didn't have contracts. We didn't have, dotted lines that we're signing. It was really on, your word and shaking that hand. Just being a loyal person, being able to give trust to people that know that they're going to trust you, but and then also trusting people.
I love it. Nate, for our listeners, they want to get in touch. They want to buy Made, Turn, or be a part of Project Packs. Where can they find you?
Yeah, just check on our websites. Our website's just turn.me. It locates all of our product throughout the entire country. And then we have the same with Made. You can learn on madeforsmokers.com. And it tells us where all of our product is. And then for Project Packs, all the brands underneath it, we're predominantly available in Arizona and then a couple states after that.
I appreciate taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.